Hi, folks, and welcome back to the original church. Today's question is, did the original church teach the rapture? Did the original Christians believe in a rapture? Now, I'm going to do this quickly, so I'm not going to be able to get into the details of this, but I do want to say a little bit about what the rapture is first. So, the hope of Hebrew religion was always this idea of the day of the Lord, when God would intervene in human history, all wrongs would be righted, and God would finally bring justice to the world. And the Jews believed that the Messiah would come and usher in the day of the Lord. Now, we as Christians believe that the Messiah has come, but the final judgment is still to come. So Jesus came in his first advent, and in a sense, that was the engagement party of the church to the groom. The church is the bride of Christ. Christ is our bridegroom, and we are engaged to him since his first advent, but the wedding is yet to come. The wedding of the Lamb is still in our future when Jesus will come again and take his bride to his home, and we will experience this great wedding banquet. And so Jesus talks about these things in his parables of the 10 bridesmaids, or sometimes called the 10 virgins, right? That we are in this engagement period waiting for the return of the groom, and the parable of the wedding banquet, where the kingdom of heaven, as he said, is going to be like a great wedding reception, this beautiful eternal family reunion. But the point of all that is that this concept of the day of the Lord is kind of split into 2 days. We had the day of the coming of the Messiah, when Jesus came first, but the real day of the Lord, the real final judgment, is still yet to come. The rapture is a concept that takes that and splits it yet again, and splits the second coming, or the return of Christ, into 2 second comings, with the idea that Christ will come again briefly, leave again, and then come again back later. So that's kind of what the rapture is doing, is taking this idea of a future return of Christ and splitting it into 2 different returns of Christ. Okay, so where does this idea come from? Well, the word rapture is an English translation of this idea that comes out of Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians, where he says that when Jesus returns, we as Christians will be caught up to meet him in heaven. And this idea of being caught up is where we get the word rapture. Here, Paul is talking about Jesus' return, his second coming, right? But the doctrine of the rapture proposes something that is not taught by Paul or anywhere else in Scripture, and this idea that Jesus' second coming is going to be split into 2 parts. Again, where he comes back, takes some people away, and then is meant to come back later for the actual final second coming. But that is simply not biblical. It's based on a mistranslation or a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of some of Jesus's apocalyptic preaching in the Gospels, like, for example, Luke 17. Now, I have to say up front, Jesus is preaching with apocalyptic language and symbolism, but that does not mean he's talking about the end times. Here in these passages, he is not necessarily speaking about his second coming. Sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. And when he isn't, he is talking about the many different types of tribulation or sufferings that people will experience in the world before his second coming and leading up to his second coming. And in the context of one of these texts, where Jesus is talking about these times of tribulation, and I think he's talking about the fall of Jerusalem here. Again, I'm talking about like Luke 17. Jesus says that there will come a time when there'll be 2 men working in the field. One will be taken and one will be left. Okay, so Jesus says there'll be some people who will be taken and some people who will be left. Now, this gets interpreted by some people as as if Jesus is saying some people will be taken up to heaven and other people will be left behind. And this is where we get the whole sort of left behind idea and doctrines, right? But that is not what Jesus is saying, and it's very easy to see this when you read it in context, because Jesus is comparing these tribulations that are yet to come, right, with the tribulation, the suffering that took place at the time of the flood with Noah and the ark. At the time of the flood, when the waters came, some people were taken, as in swept away by the flood and killed, they died, and others were left, as in left alive. And this is what Jesus is talking about here too. In this future tribulation that he predicts, some people will be taken away. They will die. They will lose their lives. And other people will be left alive. They will survive. It's not about being left behind at all. And this passage and these sets of passages, right, where one is taken and one is left, this is not meant to be combined with 1 Thessalonians, because Jesus is not talking about the second coming here, right? So this doctrine of the rapture, where Jesus is supposed to come briefly, take some really good people away, and then leave some people on earth for later, and then come back again. All of that is a completely made up thing, and it was only made up within the last couple of hundred years. It's not even a product of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, now, if you want to know how the original Christians actually would have interpreted this idea of the end times and the second coming of Jesus, and especially the book of Revelation, check out my book, The Wedding of the Lamb. It's The Wedding of the Lamb, a historical approach to the book of Revelation, and this is my attempt at explaining how the original Christians, the original audience for the writing of the book of Revelation, how they would have understood it. So, did the original church teach a rapture? Did the original Christians believe in the rapture? Not at all. It's a completely made-up concept, and it comes along really late in the history of the church. And it's ironic because usually it's people who believe in the doctrine of sola scriptura, right, who come up with this idea of the rapture that is simply not in Scripture. It's not in the book of Revelation, and in fact, if you want to try and figure out where it would fit into the chronology of the book of Revelation, you really have to jam it in there, which completely goes against John's warning at the end of the book of Revelation not to add anything to the book of Revelation. And so ironically, people who believe in sola scriptura, Scripture alone, are adding to Scripture when they create and try to jam in this doctrine of the rapture. Now, to be fair, the doctrine of sola scriptura is also not in Scripture. So if there was some kind of development of biblical doctrines, something founded in Scripture that logically or legitimately led to a doctrine of the rapture, well, that would be something we could talk about. But there is not. There is nothing in Scripture that points to a two-stage second coming. Now, I know that I'm actually not quite doing the doctrine of the rapture justice in the sense that I'm oversimplifying it here, and there are several different versions of the doctrine of the rapture. There are various ways and various theories that scholars and theologians try to reconcile all this, various theories about where the rapture is supposed to fit into the whole end times chronology and relative to the so-called millennium and all of that. But all of these eventually fall flat, because the minute you assume a rapture at all, in the sense of a two-part second coming, or the minute you start adding these things to the book of Revelation, or the minute you combine 1 Thessalonians and the idea of the second coming with Jesus' preaching where he's not talking about the second coming, the minute you do any of that, well, then it is Scripture. It is the Bible that gets left behind. So, did the original church teach the doctrine of the rapture? Did the original Christians believe in a rapture? No, they did not, because they could not see it in Scripture because it isn't there. It's based on a complete misunderstanding and bad interpretation. Now, again, if you want to know what the original Christians did think about the end times and Jesus' second coming and how they would have read and understood the book of Revelation, a great place to start is my book, The Wedding of the Lamb. I hope you'll check it out. And thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I really appreciate that. Please share this video with your friends, and please join me in the Original Church community on locals.com. Don't forget that if you join the Original Church community on locals.com, you can join me each week for a live, in-depth, chronological Bible study. It's live streamed every Saturday, but you can watch it later if you're not available. So join me for that, and I'll see you there. I hope to see you there. I hope to see you there, and I'll see you there.